Hello friend, you find me here today embarking on a whole new venture because I have decided that 2026 is the year that I finally get over the fear and attempt oil paints for the very first time in my 40s after a whole lifetime of creating art in all different kinds of media. So it's exciting and it's a bit scary, and there are reasons for my waiting this long to give oil paint a try, which I will no doubt dig into as I ramble along. But just to start off with, I'm working on a study of an African leopard, which I'm hoping will be the very first in a new collection of oil paintings that I will continue to work on throughout the year. The reasons for choosing the leopard and the collection, it's all about big cats. I like big cats. What can I say? I don't know if it goes much deeper than that. I think they're just gorgeous, beautiful animals that I've always loved ever since I was a kid. And I've just always been obsessively drawing them and painting them, or at least I did when I was younger. I have a very deep connection with cats generally. My family have always had cats. So again, I dare say that's something I will end up rambling about a little bit more later on. But I just want to start with like the technical aspects really for now. So it's just a small study, as you can see, because this is my first attempt at a new medium, and this is, I think, the first time I'm actually drawing an animal on canvas for about 12 years. I did a series of meadowscapes last year, which I will share a link to in the show notes. But yeah, drawing animals really is where it's at for me. I love paleo art, I love natural history art and wildlife art, so it feels good to be painting a thing that moves and breathes again. I'm actually starting out with the underpainting in acrylics. I have experimented a little bit with the oil paints on those meadowscapes over the top of the acrylics, but I didn't really do it in a serious way. So for this painting, I'm just sticking with acrylic for the underpainting in the first instance, and I will hopefully quite quickly move on to oil paints once I've got the colours blocked in and the image is all roughed out. And I'm working from a single reference image for this piece, but I have made a couple of little changes. The eyes, the expression in the original reference image are a bit wider and a bit sort of starey, and I wanted a slightly calmer mood for this image, but hopefully not losing that intensity that I think all cats have when they hold your gaze. So I've just made a few little adjustments around the eyes, and I've done a very abstract background in the first instance. I will probably end up doing an abstract background even in the final thing, because I just I don't much enjoy doing backgrounds, you know. And for this image particularly, I don't want to labour on it for too long. I want to learn as much as I can and then move on from there, really. And having worked out the underpainting in acrylics, I'm now moving on to the oil paints, and I'm just using the white spirit that we have in the house anyway for doing DIY work to thin these down in the first instance. I have heard a lot of artists on YouTube say, whilst I was doing my research for diving into oils, I've heard a lot of people say that when you're first starting out with oil paints as a medium, you should avoid using mediums and thinners, just because it complicates the process, and it's a good idea to just get to know the paints straight out of the tube in and of themselves. But I tried, and that just didn't work for me. I very quickly found that, yeah, I do need to dilute these a fair bit. But in the first instance, I was just laying down some block colours with fairly dilute paint. And there's an awful lot of faffing, I have to say, that I cut out from the footage. I mean, there's no illusions here. Every video that we watch on YouTube is at least 3 times as long as the thing that ends up on the page, unless it's something super small. But yeah, I was moving very, very slowly and cautiously all throughout this process. And now that I've got a lot of the colours blocked out, it's a little bit patchy, but I'm just coming in with a fine detail brush to just sort of get my feel for really detailed painting again, around the nose and the muzzle, trying to get this sense of a really 3-dimensional form. And I love the way big cats particularly pick up an awful lot of scars all around the muzzle. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and it's so much fun to draw and to paint as well. So I'm enjoying just taking my time with this, feeling my way as I go. I don't really have much of a plan, I guess, for this first piece. I'm just feeling my way and just trusting my intuition, really. I did find when I was in secondary school and my teachers were teaching us formally, how to paint using acrylics, they told me that the way I was painting was wrong, because I would paint in much the same way that I would draw, in that I'd sketch out an outline and then I would work up each area in very fine detail, typically starting with the area around the eyes and the nose, and then gradually working my way out from there. But they really sort of encouraged is too soft a word, and forced is too strong a word. They made me an offer I could not refuse, to work in layers and passes all over the canvas, in gradually increasing layers of detail. And there is great value in that. I'm very glad that someone pushed me to create in that way. But I think particularly for oil paints, especially doing the research that I have for this project, I've seen actually an awful lot of people working in oils work in exactly the same way that I do, that is intuitive to me, concentrating on one small area at a time and filling in those details in blocks, essentially. Although, as you can see, I did stay true to the sort of the sketchy passes way of doing things for the underpainting, just to lock in the form, make sure the anatomy was right, and to key in those darkest and lightest areas. And here I'm starting to have fun and just continually working over and over the same area, probably a little bit too much if I'm honest. But there's a lot of lovely bounce light in this image, because you can't see it the way this image is cropped, but the leopard's actually walking next to a pool of water in the photograph, and there's so this lovely bloom from the sun, because the image is slightly overexposed, and there's a little bit of bounce light coming off the water. So I wanted to try and capture that and emphasize that a bit in this image. I've got to be honest, I maybe slightly over-egged it. I think at this point I've lost that bounce light, and yeah, that's sadly how it goes sometimes. That we can overwork things, especially when you're overthinking it. as I am, obviously, I'm doing this for the very first time, using materials I'm not used to working with, and so I'm overthinking everything. And obviously, I've sped a lot of this up and cut a lot of it out because I had to really take my time with this painting, an awful lot more than I ordinarily would have. But what I'm doing now is I'm trying to get that sculptural sort of three-dimensional effect by just layering over the dark fur and the light fur to get that sense of individual strands all laid over each other. And obviously I do not want to be drawing every individual strand of hair. That would take forever. And also it wouldn't actually look that convincing, which might sound counterintuitive, but whenever we look at anything, our brains can only take in so much information at once, and the human brain's very good at passing whatever data it needs, jettisoning the rest, and then filling in the gaps with what it knows should be there, because, you know, in this case, my brain has seen many leopards before, and it's seen many furry things before, so it has a pretty good sense of what the fur on a leopard should look like. I say that as if I've seen many leopards in the wild. Obviously, I only get to see them on the telly or occasionally in a zoo because I live in England and don't get to travel much. Maybe that's partly why I love big cats, because we don't have any big cats left here in the UK. Sadly, there was a time in the not too distant past when we had more megafauna, but just moving on to what I'm doing now, I'm just remodeling the chin a little bit because I've lost some of the definition, particularly when I was doing the blocking in of the background. So I'm just spending a little bit more time just finessing that and getting some of the contrast back in there, because it was looking a little bit flat. And I will come back to that later, but I also need to try and get these ears looking a little bit neater. They're very sketchy at the moment, and also because I'm trying to work from dark to light, this ear particularly is just, it's looking very dense and it's kind of throwing me off, which it shouldn't do, but it is. So I'm working into this, just finessing all of the tufts of fur and really taking my time to think very critically about where that fur is coming from in the ear and the shape of the ear, which is something that I typically wouldn't spend so much time on when I was a teenager. I think I'd look at it and I'd do my best to draw it, and that'd pretty much be it. But now I'm trying to get that lovely sense of light shining through the ear, and I'd say I'm loving the way that the oil paints are really allowing me to do this, because they do have this gorgeous sort of luminescence about them, which I can achieve with acrylics, but it's a bit tough. Whereas it's all coming quite naturally with the oil paints. Incidentally, I do apologise for the colour and light balance occasionally going a little bit off in this video. I work in a very small studio space with a combination of natural and unnatural light, and I'm often working into the evenings, and yeah, the light levels are just very variable, and it's a bit of a challenge to keep on top of it. But now that I've pretty much worked into the whole of my subject with the oil paints, I want to just go over the background again, because this is still the acrylic underpainting, and when this is finished I don't want any of that acrylic to be visually present on the canvas. I'm working with a big flat brush, keeping it very loose. If I go into something like a smaller filbert, I just know I'm going to get all lost in the details and it's not going to be the effect that I want, and I'll be here forever. But now that's done, I can really start having fun with bringing some of those dark areas back in that I keyed in the underpainting. And by working from darker to lighter and then back to dark again, and then I will put some highlights over right at the end, that helps to give that impression of the three-dimensionality of fur, the way that it wraps around every contour of that 3D form, and it's all overlapping each strand with another. And it's important to be aware always when drawing hair or fur or anything of that nature, to remember that it does bunch itself up into clumps as well. So I'm trying to retain some of that in this image, and I've lost a little bit at this point, so I will try to get some of those creases and clumps in as I go. And here I'm really trying to get this impression of sort of wet, sort of slightly saliva sodden fur just around the muzzle, alongside that beautiful sort of slick black leathery gum line that cats have. And I should say at the moment there is very little black paint in this image. Most of what looks like black is Payne's grey, with just a little bit of not even white paint but lightened grey paint for those highlights. So even the blacks and the whites, they might look black and white, but they're not at the moment. They are either very, very pale brown or a very, very dark grey or a very, very dark brown. Here I'm just having fun adding some of those finer details to the chin. Those little speckles that often we, or certainly I, don't notice with an animal like a leopard just when I'm looking at it. But it's only when you start to observe a subject in fine detail to paint it that these little details actually spring out at you. So now that that's done, I'm getting to the point where I'm working with my very, very finest brush, and you can see I'm very nervously and tentatively working around the eyes with some spinel black, and these are the only areas where jet black appears in this painting. So it's that skin around the eyes, and then a little bit in the lips themselves. And I'm being so careful at this point because, oh dear, a bit of a bloom there. Yeah, I'm really happy with how this is shaping up now, especially for my first attempt, and I don't want to screw things up now. And here I'm just adding some highlights to the muzzle, and I don't want it to look like the black spots anywhere are just stuck on top of the fur. I'm trying to get this sense of black fur layered onto brown fur, and then lighter brown fur layered on top of that, and so on and so forth. Whilst retaining some of those yellows, some of those more sort of greyish tans, some of the deeper russets as well. And also, the mouth isn't very wide open, but I still want to pay attention to the teeth. We can't see much of them, but it can really let a painting down, I think, if there's one area that just hasn't been given the attention that it deserves. And in the same vein, just adding some of those tiny little freckles to the ears. Again, the kind of thing that you don't necessarily notice when looking at an animal, but it's only when you start to observe it in really close detail that these little bits jump out. And I think that can make the difference between a really well executed painting that just doesn't quite look real, and another one that maybe isn't quite so slick, but it does, because it has those little imperfections and just those little special bits that make an animal individual. And this is the fun part now, adding the highlights, all those wispy bits. Again, this bit around the eyes, because they're such a focal point, I am being so careful. One slip of my brush at this point, and I'm doomed, frankly. But you just have to feel the fear sometimes and go for it anyway. And it is quite challenging getting the sense of all these various hairs mostly going in the same direction, but occasionally you get some that go off in a different direction. And that again, that can be something that really makes a difference between an image of an animal that looks realistic and another one that just looks a little bit manufactured and stagey. You can get that uncanny valley kind of thing sometimes. I think it's hard to put your finger on why. I think 9 times out of 10 it's because it's just a bit too perfect. Apologies, I realise I have waffled pretty much continuously for about 20 minutes now, but we are nearing the end of the process, just as I'm bringing in those bounce lights again that I was a little bit worried that I'd lost earlier. And one thing I do need to work on is my skill with contrasting light. There are some artists that can just work with light the way a sorcerer works with magic. There's some special sauce there, and that's something that I'd really like to be able to capture myself. I mentioned, I think at the start of this video, that I'd put off trying oil paints for so many years. And there's lots of reasons for this. I was taught how to paint in acrylics at school, but oil paints were never made available to us. So I had no formal training in them. And I wanted to learn them. I was intrigued, but just all the expense of buying a whole new set of paints, plus all of the solvents and the mediums, just felt like more than I could realistically take on in my teenage years. And also just the fact that it is a big learning curve, not just the way that you use the mediums and the solvents, but also the drying time and the way that being able to work into wet paint for a long time is great, but I've also been doing battle with dust and pet hair and various other things. So the learning curve, I'd say it wasn't intimidating, but it was just a little bit too much for me to deal with at various times in my life. And then there's also snobbery. There's an awful lot of people who are very snooty about oil paints and very haughty about them as a superior art form to acrylic paints and gouache and watercolours. And I just, I'm not attracted to that. I think it's generally people trying to make themselves sound more knowledgeable about art than perhaps they really are. What do you think? Answers in the comments, please. I'm just adding a little bit of detail in the eyes to make them a little bit more glossy. Some of these details don't really exist in the original reference image, but I think I think a pair of eyes in a painting or an image that don't have some kind of light bouncing off them, it just looks a bit weird. And here I'm going in with just a little bit of that spinel black again, just to pick out the deepest blacks in the pupils. And there we have it. It is done. My very first oil painting, and only it's the first painting on canvas of an animal that I've done for like 12 years. So all in all, I'm really happy with how she's turned out, and I can't wait to do more of these. And also, if you're an artist who's been working in water-based media for a while and you're not sure if you want to give oil paints a go, I think, just give them a go. You never know, you may just surprise yourself. So thank you again for spending time with me today. I hope to see you again in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.